Good evening, councillors, officers, members of the public, a member in the chamber and those joining us via the webcast this evening. I would like to welcome you all to this evening's Cabinet meeting. Today, Wednesday, the 7th of February 2024, being held here in the Town Hall in Maidstone. Before we get underway, the usual items of housekeeping. I'd be grateful if you could just make sure that electronic and digital devices are in their most silent form for the duration of the meeting. And I'd also like to say that there are no planned fire drills this evening. So should we hear such a thing, please consider it to be a real event and await instructions from the Democratic Services team as to how to evacuate the building. As I've already alluded to, this evening's meeting is being recorded and broadcast, and it will be available for playback on our YouTube channel. But may I ask if anybody else has any plans to record? And I ask you not to prevent you, just so that others in the room would be aware. Nobody's waving any cameras or microphones around. I'd also ask you just to be diligent with the use of microphones this evening, because that's the only way that the outside world will hear us. And please make sure you switch them off when you finish speaking. I think I've covered all the necessary, so we can go straight to business. And I start with apologies for absence, but we're a full house, so there are none. Item 2, urgent items. So we do have a proper urgent item this evening, so you will have seen, I'm sure, the amended agenda. So we agreed to take that as a urgent item because it's a time sensitive decision. May I also ask officers whether the note about the feedback from the PACs, is that submitted as an urgent item?
It's an update to existing items, so it's just an update.
So is it an update? So yeah. Yes. So we'll enter that into the public record as an additional document that we have in front of us this evening. Members seated here this evening, I think you have had chance to see that in advance, but if you do need any additional time to peruse it, let me know when we come to that moment. At item 3, I'd like to take a note of visiting members, please, and just to be a pain, if you would come to the speakers table and just announce yourself, and if there's any items you wish to speak to, I would be grateful.
Councillor Wilkinson for item 19.
Thank you.
Councillor Cleater for item 12, item 18 and item 19.
12, 18 and 19. Thank you very much. Next, I must ask both members and officers, are there any disclosures for this evening? No indications, none noted. And I ask a similar question concerning lobbying. Has anybody been lobbied on this evening's papers? No indications. Item 6, we always give some thought as to whether there are any part 2 papers ahead of us. You will be aware that the additional item that we've introduced has yellow pages attached to it. So if we need to refer to those, we would need to go into part 2. And I suggest we deal with that as that arises. Everybody happy with that? Can we look at the minutes, please, from our meeting held on the 24th of January, please? Circulated with the agenda packs. I trust you've had a chance to have a look. We're only concerning ourselves with matters of accuracy. Is everybody content that these are an accurate record and I sign them? Is that agreed? Thank you. At 8, we have no petitions presented this evening, nor at 9 and 10 do we have any questions before us, and no matters have been referred to the Cabinet for reconsideration. So we're at 12. This is the report of Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Environmental and Waste Crime Enforcement Review, and I understand Councillor Mrs. Cleater is presenting that on behalf of the Chairman. Councillor Mrs. Cleater being the Vice Chair of Overview and Scrutiny. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman or Leader, or whatever I'm supposed to call it, Cabinet, because it's the first time I've been here. I'm just presenting this report on behalf of Overview and Scrutiny. There's been a lot of work cross-party done on this, and I would ask that you note the recommendations and agree them as outlined in the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I don't think we need to give this any discussion immediately unless anybody's got any particular points to raise. We have 60 days to prepare a formal response to Overview and Scrutiny, which we'll be delighted to do and provide in due course. Does anybody need to say anything at the moment, or are we just happy to receive? So is it agreed that the report is received? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 13, no matters have been referred to the executive by other committees. And at 14, there are no serious service failures for us to consider. And we have no written reps before us from members. So we're now at agenda item 16. That's the forward plan to be found at page 25 onwards in the agenda pack. I think I'm correct in saying that the major monthly update is due out on Friday. So there will be quite a big update to it. We're all going to receive that on Friday. Is there anything anybody needs to specifically mention or flag up? In which case, what is before us is simply to be noted. Is it noted? Thank you. Agenda item 17, we have before us this evening the Biodiversity and Climate Change Action Plan update. This has been in each section relevant to the remit of the PAC committees to each PAC committee. I think generally the response has been very favourable from the PACs. Speaking personally, I'm always frustrated that we're not doing more faster, but I do believe that we are doing all the big things that we can. In particular, we've got the grant applications in process for the significant upgrades to our buildings for lower carbon heating and the like. These are not instantaneous overnight projects, but we're getting very close to actually starting to see some of that deliver. The HHE PAC, they agreed that we should note the report. There were no further suggestions from them. Similarly from PIDE PAC. CLA PAC, yes, to note the report, but they've also made a further suggestion asking that action plans for the 5 items listed in paragraph 2.4 be submitted to the relevant committees by September 2024. So we do need to give some thought to that recommendation. And that was also suggested by Corporate Services. So members want to come in at all? Councillor Mrs. Russell.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So this was just referring to the TLA PAC one from last night. That was the second recommendation had also been raised at Corporate Services. So we accepted it last night, but giving it more thought, I've actually just got a question on it, because when you look at 2.4, it says about the focus and priorities of biodiversity and climate change strategy has been changed to areas where reducing the largest impacts of the borough's carbon emissions can be made. And then you've got the 5 items that they want the more reports on. But I'm just a bit confused, maybe it's just me, because I thought that is the action plan, then goes into separate bits following on from that. So I suppose before I am happy to take forward the recommendation through Cabinet, I just need to understand a bit more about what that actually is, because I'm a little bit confused.
Might perhaps ask Mr. Wilson if he could help, but for my own contemplation of this, I think the very fact that we are reporting the progress twice a year with an annual review is kind of achieving what is being asked for already. So, Mr. Wilson, I don't know if you've got any other guidance to give us on this.
No, I agree with that. I think there are overlaps within the actions already. I think these are more general strategic ways to look at these areas across the borough, and so it might open up more discussion about how we look at net zero housing and how we can access more funding for that, and how we can look at specific areas. And for transport, it might open up new dialogue in terms of different initiatives we can have influence on and do directly. So they are covered in the action plan, but this would give more of a broad stroke and other areas we could look at and see if we can include.
I think that makes sense. Did you want to come back, Councillor Mrs. Russell?
No, only just to say thank you. I think that just added more clarity for me. So these would be overarching ones that would be prepared alongside the ones that go to our individual packs for our specific portfolios. And presumably they would, when they were brought back together, that would go to all of the packs and then to Cabinet. Is that how that would work?
Yeah, that's right. I think another way to look at it is that there's national targets in terms of EV take up or house building, things like that. So this would we'd have something to say about that, and then they would feed back into the relevant packs. So it's aligning with bigger strategies, but bringing it to a borough size. If that makes sense.
So just a couple of other comments for me, overarching. And we were having an informal chat, a couple of us, about this as we were just waiting to come into the meeting. And right at the beginning of this report, we're talking about our 2030 net zero target. I don't think this evening's the moment to deep dive into whether we're actually on course for that. And it's really good to have the highest level of target to aim for. But I think we've got to set the path as realistically as we can so that we actually do have the milestones to tick off to reach the point. So I just flag that up. And the drum that I bang every time, I think we've got to constantly, in every meeting this council has, part of the thought process with every agenda item is, what is the impact to our climate change biodiversity plan? Is there something that we could do that makes that outcome better, rather than it's a standalone agenda? The third point that I think we've got to constantly, or a major piece of work that we need to be looking to is the metrics that we're using for this. I know we've got the carbon dashboard and there's some big numbers and they go up and they go down. But I certainly crave that more reasoned, more logicked carbon accounting, if you like, to support what we're doing. If you look at the data in front of us, it was this level, it shot up. But we say to ourselves, don't worry, because we got another building. And then it's gone down again a little bit on that. But that doesn't really give us a progress path of whether we're, at very high. I crave a better set of metrics, and I know we've discussed this many times. And then the final thing, I want to do another plug for the training. There is the carbon literacy training available to us. I've been through that. It is actually really interesting. Whether you're 100% sold on it or you've got some doubts about its validity, it is very informative training. So putting out the plug there to all the other councillors that I'm sure are listening to the webcast this evening. If you're not signed up, sign up and keep promoting it, please. So we've considered that further recommendation from the packs. I think if the minutes could show that we have considered it, but we are content that the reporting process at this time is appropriate anyway. And it's all there for the reading and the taking. And other than that, it's just the technicality of noting the report. So I move that we note it. Is it noted? Thank you. We can next go on to agenda item 18, medium-term financial strategy, as we move to taking this towards full council. Councillor Perry, this is your portfolio. Would you mind giving us a bit of an intro, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I've got loads of notes in front of me, and I do apologise. I can't really read any of them, so I'm going to do this off the top of my head. If that's first of all, let me say that this report really is what when I said it at the pack on Monday, is the big report. It covers not just the budget, it covers the council tax, it covers the capital programme, it covers it sets out in Appendix A the proposed savings that we can make, and what I would say, this leads to a balanced budget for 74-25. It is absolutely a good position to be in, and something that I would like to really thank all the officers, particularly the finance department, clearly, who've done a lot of work on this, but it's a product of the whole council, really. So from, dare I say it, from the chief executive downwards, it's something to be very pleased with, I think, and particularly when we compare our position with a lot of councils in the country. What it does assume is a 3% increase in the council tax, which is below current inflation. So in real terms, it is a reduction. This works out actually at 16 pence per week. So it is not exactly, although I've got to be careful what I use my words here, because I realise people are struggling with increases, but 16 pence is a relatively low figure, I think, for the standard of services that this council provides, and I think that's very important always to bear in mind. Just a couple of points I just wanted to raise, before I do, just to say it also covers the Treasury function here, which I think is well known. The Treasury programme, the Treasury code that we use the Prudential Code, the CIPFA Prudential Code. We are very careful in the way we handle our Treasury management, and I think that's paid off as well in the future. Just to say a couple of things, the balanced budget produces a small surplus of 92k, I think, and it's proposed that part of that will be used for a welfare officer for financial exclusion work, and I think that's very important, and also possibly to finance the our magazine, which I forget what it's called now, but you know what I mean. Yeah, Borough Insight. Yeah, I'm sorry, it completely slips my mind. So those two things are covered by this 92k. This was raised also at the PAC on Monday, which they also supported as well. So it is part of their consideration. The other point I would make is that in this financial settlement that we have, not just the 3%, we're allowed up to the 3% referendum limit, but also we got to, what I call a guarantee as well, which is worth another 3% increase as well. Now, this is proposed that the bulk of this would go into the housing investment fund, but a portion, I think the proposal is 198,000, would be used for financial inclusion funding. So there's a small amount that will go into that, but the balance would go into the housing investment fund, because I do think it is very important that we continue to ensure that our reserves are sound, and we do have very sound reserves, but they're not over the top. If you look at it, I think they're about 3 months expenditure, I think they're worth. So in terms of the total position, our reserves are very sound, but that they're not exaggerated, if I could use that particular word. So there are a list of recommendations which I would ask you to support, including the amendment. I think that needs amending for the 92K, and to note the 198,000. There's one other point, a couple of other points I would mention. We do fund, I think, Kent. I think it's called Kent Savers. This is a type of quasi-banking setup that we fund to help people who aren't within the banking system. We are proposing that should be extended to 2032. Correct me, Mark, if I got that wrong, but I think that was the other thing. The other final thing I would make, there's a small correction that as part of the overall financial settlement, we can bring forward charging for empty homes and second homes on council tax. Now, that it will not come in until the 1st of April 2025. I think in the paper you'll see it says 1st of April 2024, but it should be 1st of April 2025. Apart from that, I recommend that we support the recommendations, subject to the minor changes that I've highlighted. Thank you, Chairman. I hope that covers
Councillor
everything.
Perry, I think given the visual challenge that you currently have, doing that from memory was very good. And what I propose that we'll do is go through the recommendations one at a time, because there are a few bits we need to tweak. But before we get into any of that, it would be good to hear what Councillor Mrs. Cleater has to say, who's asked to speak as visiting member.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, my ward and Councillor Wilkinson's ward is one of the wards that has the larder there. So we're seeking clarification. Point 15, sorry, point 15, 92,000 surplus budget. Is that coming out of the 198, or is that in addition to the 198 ring fence? That's a point of clarification to me. And also, obviously, in terms of how the larders are funded, we did have NHS money. It's about how we continue to support some of the most disadvantaged people and how we're going to do that going forward. I understand point 4 quite rightly. I think we need to have that flexibility in there to be able to look at how we deliver that. But obviously for Shepway, High Street Ward and Park Ward, we're getting a lot of positive feedback about the larder, about people engaging with other services as well as making use of that. And the fact that they pay the £3 gives them a bit of pride. You know, they don't want to use food banks. They want to be able to contribute something. And my big worry, if it's a threat to them, and probably we need them in the more rural areas as well, to be quite honest. And if you look in other areas, they do have mobile larders that go round to outlying villages in the Merseyside area, because we do have villages up north. So that is what I would like to see. My other issue is I am really concerned about the impact of any cuts that KCC make that are going to aggravate all of this. We're clearly seeing that everybody is struggling with budget, and I think it's to the credit of our officers and, you know, the fact that we've been pretty savvy with our money, that we're in a healthier position than most. And it's something that the public are picking up on. There's a table in the Kent Online, I believe, and on Facebook and everywhere else. They're actually 20 quid ahead, 28 quid ahead for us, and then eye-watering when you get to KCC and other authorities and that. So for me, it's about how we balance our budget, but with these recommendations, how we continue to support some of the most vulnerable and give them a pride to help themselves. Because if they don't have that, then it is food banks And to me, that's a step backwards for people, and how we can encourage people to engage more in community activities, and if need be, come up with a way that we can enhance the scheme in terms of helping out people in the more rural areas. Because the one thing I know since living in Kent is the fallacy that everyone who's rich in Kent is just that, a fallacy. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Let's sort of address a few of the points that you've made there straight off the bat. And, I think we start by saying, we absolutely share your concerns about the future of Larders, but more generally, the work that we do to support financial inclusion and the rest of it. So our scenario was the Larders started with some NHS funding. It was a project. Maidstone's expanded that, but the NHS funding is no longer there. Household support grant, which also contributed to these activities significantly. All of the indications are it will not be there, but till the final announcement is made by government, we won't know. So when we were preparing this, it was the first thing that came to our mind as how we address this. Now, we are not with budget forever and ever that we can roll up Food Larders forever and ever, but I think, and the option we're looking at is there are ways forward with making them social enterprise based or working with other organisations for sustainability. That may or may not need a bit of capital funding to initiate that, but it's going to take a bit of time to work out what options are, and I think we'll see reports in due course. Meanwhile, it has been a priority to us to ensure that there's, let's call it, interim funding whilst that is explored and worked out. And the report also alludes to, checking behind the sofa and seeing if there's any other pots of residual unspent grant that can be applied. So there's a number of mechanisms coming to the fore. We were planning to just top slice the 198 from I call it the Gove money, that supplementary money, but with the additional bit of business rates income that we've got, which is the 92 extra, we can reduce what we need to top slice out of that, which leaves more in that housing, that social housing, affordable housing investment fund, which is important to us all and maximises what we have in the revenue pot here and now. I think we've got to be very clear when we make that recommendation that the 198, some of that is now substituted by the 92 or part of the 92. I think it's 57 or something is the figure in there. We'll go through this very systematically, but addressing the points you've raised, I think this cabinet has put in place a good plan for short-term business as usual, whilst we explore how do we make these, I'm going to say services, but the Larders is what we're talking, sustainable and expandable. One of the issues, as you well know, I started off by representing Parkwood Ward. I know exactly the particular issues that we'll find in areas such as that. I happen to now be representing Marden, but I promise you, in every ward in this borough, there are examples of where we need to place the help. And, my ambition would be that we have a service that is available to the whole borough. We've started in some specific areas. We need a new sustainable model, but I don't think we know all the answers of how we're going to do it, but it won't be for want of trying to come up with a expandable, sustainable scenario to support our residents. Hopefully that addresses most of the points that you made there. Members, is there anything anybody else would like to add to that? So Councillor Mrs. Russell.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was just going to speak because obviously the Household Support Fund comes from government via KCC and then comes down into my portfolio. So when we heard it might face being cut, that's when we looked at, oh my goodness, what does it do? what can we look at continuing? A lot of this money is vital for our residents, and I think what you see is a plan that we've put in place to try and keep as much of that going as we can, with the hope that we still end up getting the household support fund. And we've certainly, joined with other council leaders to try and put pressure back on the government to say, look, our residents need this money. And part of what David talked in detail about the larders, but what I was really pleased to see is that the welfare officer and the LIFT database has actually now been put into the base budget, because then that means we'll roll forward with that, and the welfare officer does bridge a really important gap where they can help people with a lot of different areas in one go, and they can signpost people to different help with a number of different service areas at once. So I think what we've come up with here is an absolute, let's not just fall off a cliff if this money ends. This is prudent, looking at the budget and trying to see how we can make that go forward. And then I think luckily with the extra bit of scope within the budget that we've, the team have done a fantastic job of closing the budget gap and then some. We've been able to put some of this into the base budget, which I think is really welcome for the service that's provided there. Thank you.
I'm just going to follow that up with another key point that I do think we need to speak out. We are very vigilant of the implications of other authorities and their cuts that cascade down onto us. We're aware of a few, let's call them risks, but they're decisions that appear not to have necessarily been crystallised elsewhere. And we know within the budget structure in front of us that there is, I think, appropriate contingency to deal with perhaps the worst of those. But I can promise you at the Kent leaders level, there is an ongoing, I'll call it dialogue, to see how we can deal with these things collaboratively rather than sequentially, shall we say. What I propose, members, is to go through just each recommendation one at a time, just so we're thorough and we've got this right. So, some advice coming from the Chief Executive. Excuse me a second. So that advice being given to me was probably, maybe you need to elaborate on some of those risks. There's one in particular. KCC are considering whether to continue with what is referred to as the waste enabling payment, a grant, about £300,000 a year to us, which is towards the costs of managing our waste streams in a manner that then suits KCC as the disposal authority, the transfer authority. We don't know what the outcome of that is going to be, but it's one of the bigger risks on our radar. But there are others and consequences that have been brewing for a while. So just to put a little bit more detail to that thinking. Members, we'll take them one at a time and resolve them as we go. The first one's very simple. So we've been given a note of the outcome of the PAC advice here, the budget proposal by the Policy Advisory. So we asked just to note that. Is that noted? So then the next decision for us is that we agree the budget growth and saving proposals are set out in Appendix A of the report. I can move that from the chair. Councillor Perry, I think, was seconding that. Is that agreed, members? Yeah. Recommendation 3 is dealing with this issue of the 198 that we were top slicing from the unring fenced. Now I've gone through this wording a number of times. You've got to kind of read it a few times to realise that what it actually means is it was 198, but we can now knock 59 off of that because we've found it from a different pot. But I think the words on the update from us cover that should I read those out for clarity? Yes. So 198,000 of the unring fenced government grant described in paragraphs 2.5, 2.6 of the report be used for one-off support to financial inclusion and food larder services be agreed, and that the call on the one-off funding for financial inclusion by 59,000 is reduced in recommendation 15 be noted. So what that is saying is we started at 198, but a further recommendation further down the page will knock that back by 59. So yeah, so in summary then, and yes, what we are saying is one, help me with the sums here somewhere, 139 it is. So we change recommendation 3 to 139,000 of the unring-fenced government grant described in paragraphs 2526 be used to support one-off funding, financial inclusion, food larder services. Moved from the chair, seconded. John, thank you. Agreed? Unanimous? And somewhat clear in that format. Yes, provided we make the other decision, but yeah. So we're at 4, which was that point I mentioned, maximum use be made of other residual one-off funding from other relevant council budgets to further sustain financial inclusion, food larder services agreed, and the position be kept under review so the council can respond to changes. So we're looking at how we address that into the future. Move from the chair. Councillor Perry again. Agreed? Right. 4, done. 5, the balance of the unring-fenced government grant as described 2526 with the extra 59 now, be transferred to the Housing Investment Fund to be used to subsidise the council's affordable housing programme. Moved by Councillor Perry, seconded by myself. Agreed? Right. That's, yeah. 6, updated strategic revenue projection set out in B of the report be agreed. Is that agreed? At 7, we're recognising that it's an £8.46 annual increase. That's 16 pence per day that Councillor Perry referred to, per week, sorry, per week, 16 pence per week. Yes. Be recommended to council. Is that agreed? 8, revised estimates 23-24 and the budget estimates for 24-25 set out in Appendix C be recommended to a council. Agreed? Capital programme set out in Appendix D be recommended to a council. Is that agreed? The Treasury Management Strategy, Investment Strategy, Capital Strategy set out in Appendix E be recommended to council. Agreed? The projected level of general fund balances, Appendix F of the report, exceeds the agreed minimum level of 4 million be noted. Is that noted? Updated medium-term financial strategy set out in Appendix G to be agreed. Is that agreed? Appropriate matters for decision to set a balanced budget 24-25 and the necessary level of council tax in accordance with Local Government Finance Act 92, Localism Act 2011, including decisions above, be recommended to council. Is that agreed? The measures in the Regeneration and Levelling Up Act to reduce the period before charging council tax premium on empty property from 2 years to 1 to charge a council tax premium on second homes be recommended to the council to be implemented from April 25. Is that agreed? At 15, it's the clarity of utilise the 92,000 budget surplus, which won't be a surplus by the time I've done this, paragraph 2.34 for financial inclusion, welfare officer and the dashboard for tracking low income families, 59,000 and at least one issue per annum of Borough Insight 33,000. Is that agreed? Amendment to the repayment date for the loan that we made to Kent Savers, reference page 97. So we're extending the loan period from 2027 to 2032. That we note that. Is it noted? And I think we can all wholeheartedly agree with this, that we thank officers for helping us get this budget to this stage. So we record that note of thanks. Agreed? I think that concludes that item. Because we've all been so in the evolution and the detail of how it all got to that, it's quite easy to rattle it all out like that. But a lot of thought went into it. We are now at the additional item, which is agenda item 19, the 1,000 Houses programme. And I'm going to ask Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid to help us out with getting a start on this, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This report has actually been through the HHE pack, where it was very well received, and pretty much got unanimous support from all of the members there. This report proposes changes to 5 previously approved council housing development projects, which are as follows: 7 homes at the Royal British Legion in Parkwood, 19 homes at the Bath Store, 24 homes in Corbyn's Yard, 28 homes at Britannia House, and 12 homes at Land at Granville Road. For the Royal British Legion, the proposal is simply switch the 7 market rent homes to social rent. Construction of this scheme is already underway. For the other 4 sites, the proposal is to deliver all the homes to social rent rather than affordable rent. For Bath Store, Britannia House, Land at Granville Road, approval is required to enter into the construction contracts at higher costs than previously reported, which is probably no surprise when we look at how construction costs have increased and interest rates have increased. As per the report, officers have an attractive indicative offer of social housing. Actually, that's now confirmed. We have a now confirmed offer of social housing grant funding from Homes England to deliver all 90 homes for social rent. This is circa 50% of market rent. Alternatively, the homes could be delivered at affordable rent, which is circa 80% of the market rent capped to the local housing allowance. Under this scenario, the grant received would be significantly less, but the rental income would be higher. The preferred option is to deliver the homes for social rent because the higher grant will mean less borrowing for the council. The rental income stream to the council will be more secure and the tenants will benefit from lower rents. I'd also like to make the committee aware of some information data from our housing team, which highlights very real need for having an available housing at social rents. When we review our current composition of households in temporary accommodation, plus being mindful of those properties coming through from registered providers via the housing register, we are aware of a cohort within temporary accommodation provision that cannot afford affordable rent. Their income and other factors, such as the benefit cap and the lack of ability to maximise income, prevents these households from moving out of our temporary accommodation into long-term accommodation. At the moment, we have 86 households who would not be able to afford affordable rent, and as such, we would recommend some social rented provision with our own stock. Under the social rent scenario, on an aggregate basis, the schemes will still meet the council's required investment returns in terms of net present value and the internal rate of return. The Cabinet has already made the decision to enter into the umbrella grant funding agreement with Homes England, so these 5 schemes will be the first to fall within that contract. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Cleater, I think you wanted to speak on this as well. Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
This is in support of option 2 on item 19.
More than 2 million council homes have been sold off since the introduction of Right to Buy in the 1980s, and only 5% of those homes have been replaced. This has led to housing demand outstripping supply and to the overheating of the housing market. According to Shelter, annual spending on housing benefit has more than doubled from 9 billion in 91-92 to 29.6 billion a year now. This means that the government's funding has been spent on helping the growing number of families cover the cost of unaffordable private rents through housing benefit, rather than investing in the bricks and mortar of new homes with low guaranteed rents and the maintenance of them. In Maidstone, rents have doubled, the housing waiting list is off the scale. In my ward alone, there are many families experiencing significant overcrowded conditions, and we have families in temporary accommodation. We have a lot of work to do, and we must act now by investing in well-built, low-carbon and low-cost social housing. We owe it to the people of Maidstone to do this properly and not implement half-baked solutions such as the 80% market rate option, which is still unaffordable for many hard-working families. If the council choose the social housing option, it will be an excellent start and a great legacy for the council to leave going forward. Thank you.
And Councillor Mrs. Cleaver.
Thank you, Chairman. Unsurprisingly, speaking in support of the social rent option, I think it's very clear that there are real issues for a lot of families in this borough about affordability of rent. But the one thing that we keep getting time and time again for most working people on the average wage is that affordable is actually unaffordable for them. Also, there is the budgetary issue. We can look at the long-term budget, but we can look at our revenue budget. The more social housing we have, the less people we will have in temporary accommodation. So it's balancing out that. There is a cost in the long term, which will eventually pay for itself, but there's also a saving in the shorter term because our temporary accommodation bill will go down. And I don't think we should underestimate that the overcrowding that we have in certain areas of Maidstone is unacceptable, and the need for social housing to give people decent accommodation, a start in life, a pride in themselves, being able to pay for the family to live in decent accommodation should be a priority for this borough. We know that the average wage here in the southeast means that accommodation, whether rented in the private sector, whether rented in the affordable sector, is unaffordable for most people. So I would welcome the options to actually go with the social rent model, and I'm more than happy to pass on a report from Unison which shows that actually for your average working person, whether you're a paramedic, whether you're a local government low paid worker, whether you work in a hospital, actually that's why we struggle to fill these posts. It's the cost of the accommodation, whether private, whether social rented. So this is a great start. And as Councillor Wilkinson said, this is the legacy that we should be proud of, that we're taking those steps to do, because we recognise the struggles that people have. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I share the sentiment of what you were just saying there. I'm extremely proud to lead a Conservative cabinet, having sat on this council for nearly 14 years and heard just about every party talk about doing something about it, that we have led the ambition to deliver our own housing stock at scale. And it's not easy, but we are doing it. The first 400 odd, I think, are in the sites acquired, contracts, as we're hearing today. I'm extremely proud to have led this cabinet to deliver that with the full support of all parties of this council. I think you can get into that's a real nitty gritty and theoretical debate of whether you charge this price, that price, or another price. I think it's worth reminding ourselves that the underlying problem as a nation, we have not built enough houses for so long. Underlying problem is still that, even with our first 1,000, it's nowhere near enough to address the issue. So when the local plan comes in front of us, hopefully not too long, I hope that we all give that unanimous support, because that's, again, this borough being positive about delivering housing and not adopting a NIMBY approach and letting somebody else deal with it. We all have to face up to delivering housing. But there are choices about how we charge it. I have come to some slightly different conclusions, but it wouldn't matter which way we go, we're doing the right thing, and I will be supporting the recommendation for the social rent. And we will maximise the grant funding from Homes England. As I look into the future, and I was discussing this earlier today, the rules and the way this is all structured is a complete mess, and it needs sorting out. And I hope that we'll soon move to a stage where there is no debate about affordable or social rent. There's that rent that people can actually pay with or without support on their income, but there's a decent home for everybody. So, I think this is a very exciting moment where we're actually releasing these contracts. And I think it's got to be noted that the reputation of Maidstone for addressing this issue rides high. We wouldn't be getting this much support from Homes England, and it's eye-watering grant support that we're getting. I think huge terms of the confidence that we have with those people further up the chain is to be noted. I think this is a real thing. Councillor Mrs. Parfitt-Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've actually just really said what I wanted to say. I just really wanted to reiterate, the ambition of this cabinet to deliver these houses. It is well and truly there. It is difficult, and as Councillor Burton said, it is a mess, but I think we are doing the very best job. We are dealing with the reality. We could all say we would like it to be like this, but it isn't. We have to deal with the cards we've got. Those are the cards we've got to play, not the ones that we would like to have. And I think also to reiterate, and I should have said it in my introduction, so I do apologise. But Councillor Cleater did say there is a cost avoidance to this. It is not just the figures that are on the papers now, it is what we will be avoiding in temporary accommodation. But again, like I say, the ambition of this cabinet and the people around this table is to deliver those 1,000 affordable homes as a start. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper, I think I saw an indication from you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly will be supporting option 2 this evening. I would like to address the point that has been raised by Councillor Wilkinson, and indeed she is correct. A large number of council houses were purchased, and I think that is a very good thing. My grandparents purchased their own council house back in the 1980s, but it is regrettable that more council houses were not built. There was no one-for-one policy, nothing like that, and the number of council houses, or indeed houses within socially affordable, has diminished dramatically over the past 40 years. The one thing that I do think we need to address going forwards, and this is another reason why a huge amount of councils do not have their own stock now, and stock that councils do own, and stock that housing associations own, often isn't as desirable as we would like it to be, and isn't as desirable as the houses that we put forward because of the ongoing finances. And I look ahead thinking of the finances of this council and indeed the rental account. We need to ensure that we get the IRR on these properties so that they can be maintained in the long run, and so that at some point, once inflation reduces the cost of debt servicing, that we have more funds available to produce more buildings. And it's on that basis that I realise, albeit regrettably, that some of the properties that we purchase going forwards probably will need to be on the affordable basis rather than all on the social rent, because I think we need to, but we do need to strike that balance. And I stress that going forwards, I really hope that we get support from across the council to realise that this isn't just a short-term thing. We're not just going to go off and build 1,000 houses, then forget about them, let them rot, and pass them over to whoever might want to grab hold of them down the line. This is an ongoing thing, and the council's obligations to the people of Maidstone doesn't end anytime soon. But that's pretty much what I want to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I do really hope that we get a simplification and a convergence of what we call it social, but we mean affordable, but affordable is actually affordable. And don't forget, social's not straightforward with additional service charges, and it's subject to inflation. So over time, our definition of affordable converges, and that would be the simplified future that I hope we all see. Any further comments, or can we move to decision making? Anybody want to move anything, or shall I do that? Councillor Garton?
Yeah, I would like to move option 2.
So per the recommendations on the paper on page 169, I think. Is that a seconder there? Those in favour, please. Unanimous. Thank you, everyone. That's good. I believe we've concluded this evening's business. I thank everybody for their contribution, their participation, their time on a grotty evening like this. And I'm delighted to announce the meeting closed.